Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in to the second episode of our interview with Woody Waters, the founder of reference-based pricing. Enjoy.
Get ready to take control of your healthcare. Here's your host, Ray Cober.
Well, and so not to beat up the brokers, right? So the brokers are one component of this. The whole system is, yeah, exactly. It's stacked against the patient. It's stacked against the member. And that's what's so frustrating. And we put out a 30-odd minute piece on the Senate committee hearings of RFK Jr. And, my disgust at the grilling that he took over that, because I don't know if you agree or disagree or care to opine, but I think we have, and what I said is, it's not a blue-red thing. This has got nothing to do with what your party affiliation is. We're all Americans. This is our health care.
Right.
Everybody's got to be up in arms about this. And what blew me away is that, I thought there were some really striking moments in the Senate committee hearing. And, Bernie Sanders, went on a rant and said, everyone's corrupt but you. The AMA is corrupt and the blah, blah, blah. And to his credit, I believe that Bernie was saying those words with conviction. But the answer, Bernie, is yes. Yes, the AMA is corrupt. And the Pediatric Association, whatever the name is, they are corrupt. They're all being funded by pharma. So in some cases, I think even our politicians who are well-intentioned are drinking kind of the media Kool-Aid that is being spewed. So to your point, it's not just the brokers, and there are many good, well-intentioned brokers out there. It's the model, though. And now you're the owner of an organization. If I come to you and I say, I got an idea, Woody. We're gonna, it's a really kind of murky, muddy process right now. We have a way to clean the swamp and clear up the water, and we're going to reduce the cost of healthcare for, our $100 billion in revenue. But in order to do that, it's going to mean that we have to take a $20 billion hit. There's no CEO that's going to sign up for that. And I think that is the problem.
Who's the CEO in that example, though, of one of the big four insurance companies?
Of course, because the ugly truth is, they're by and large, their book of business is dependent upon their relationship with the insurance carrier, which also owns the PBM.
Right.
And so the insurance carrier is beholden to their stockholders. They're making money with both hands. The large brokers, their primary stack of business relies on their relationship with the insurance carriers. They're living the American dream. And I am a proud American. I love capitalism. I'm not saying don't make money. It's really what makes this country great. It's the ability to, look, you're a successful guy. It didn't happen by itself. You took risk. You put money up. You found investors. All of that stuff, you can't just ignore it, right? And the reward is, if you succeed, you can do very well. Why vilify that now? They're doing well. The trouble that I have, though, is in our system, the fiduciary obligation is to the shareholders. It can't simultaneously be to the policyholders.
Yeah.
You're a smart guy. What the hell do we do about this?
Well, I don't. So if we go right back to blocking and tackling, like the feds have set up a very simple, from ERISA through the CAA, a very simple paint by numbers ability to change this for my plan.
Yeah.
If I'm a CHRO or a CEO or an owner or a CFO at a company large enough to be self-funded, I can handle my plan if I have the gumption and the willpower to do it. I don't think any more than are already there, and again, I think they're plentiful. I don't think any more solutions or regulations necessarily coming from the government. So, and
I agree with that wholeheartedly, by
yeah.
the way. I don't think we could look to the government to solve this
No,
problem.
and I think we're in when, you know, our company probably closes, Ray, somewhere between 8 and 15% of the opportunities we work on. If it's at 15, it's in certain classes of business and in certain markets that we've identified, and that's higher than it's ever been. And we're bringing on so far this year a batch of more of the largest clientele we've ever been. Large for us is anything 3,000 to 5,000 employees or north of there. Like our largest client is 11 or 12,000 covered employees, and we've landed for January 1 and 26 more of those than we ever have. But to answer your question and to use my hometown Atlanta as an example, like we have Rollins, the large pest control company, as a client. And they're a name brand. They're the Orchid Man, you know, the pest control. And they're a very respected company nationwide. And we're proud to have them as a client. But what we need to happen is somebody in Atlanta like the Coca-Cola company or Delta Airlines or UPS move to reference-based pricing.
Yeah.
And here's why Coke particularly frustrates me. The two founding families of Coca-Cola are the same two largest donors and founding families of Emory University. Emory University has the most prestigious hospital in town.
Yep.
The most prestigious physician practitioners in town. Coke and Emory are 3 miles apart as the crow flies. Why is United Healthcare and Blue Cross in between Coca-Cola members and Emory University Hospital? Why couldn't Coke in Atlanta? Now, worldwide, you may have to have other solutions, you know, wraps, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But in Atlanta, why couldn't the Coca-Cola company be self-funded? It already has a clinic. Why couldn't they build out the clinic? Why couldn't they couldn't they cut a direct deal with Emory Hospital System and all those physician practices? Pay cash directly, just like you said.
Right.
Hire somebody to administer it. If those 30,000 employees or 40, ever how many are in Atlanta, if they did that, you know what would happen if that domino fell? Somebody again, back to the demand side.
Yeah.
Somebody big and important on the demand side in each major area around the country has got to change this.
Yeah.
It only has a business solution, and you've been during this dialogue, you've been all over it. You have to solve a business problem with a business solution, and until you start looking at your health plan for what it is.
Yeah.
Like it's the second or the third largest subsidiary or operating unit or division of my company, I'm going to fix it. Until that happens, I'm not sure what to say.
So I just pulled this book up, The Great American Healthcare Heist by Chris Deacon.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you had an opportunity to read this or not, but and I haven't gotten all the way through it. But Chris was, she's an attorney by trade. She ran the healthcare system for the state of New Jersey. And she was an agent of change because she pulled back the curtain and she realized firsthand what was going on and all of the waste and, just the excesses that the spend was off the charts. And she calls a meeting with, the execs for, I may have this wrong. I'm gonna say Cigna, but one of the major insurance carriers. And, they come in and they're having a meeting and she's there with her staff and her people. And, she's saying like, we need to do better. Like our costs are off the charts and we need to do better. And things are kind of, somber in the room. And then out of nowhere, door opens, in walks the governor. Hugs and kisses all around the room. And the whole conversation flips. And so, she goes on to say that ultimately, as a personal decision, I believe she ended up resigning from her position because she was kind of told not to mess with what was in place. And so, to your point, yes, something has to change on the demand side, but there's a dance being done. And what you don't know and what I don't know, and it's so funny because I'm watching, I'm a few miles from Citi Field, and the Mets, the big rivalry with the Braves. Braves typically kick our asses, but this year the Mets they have a shot.
Yeah.
And I'm watching some other ball games. I'm not a huge sports fan, but it's that time of year, so the playoffs are exciting. And every stadium that I'm looking at, behind home plate, there's a banner of United Healthcare. So my point is, the demand side, yes, but there's a dance. And maybe I'm opining one hand washes the other. Well, we're going to use United Healthcare, but United Healthcare is going to shower us with a ton of advertising.
Right.
And, so I think, and that's kind of business. I get it. When are we going to get to a point, though, where everybody, our politicians that are accepting PAC money, and they're all accepting PAC money from the pharmaceuticals, from the insurance lobbying arms, from, the major insurance carriers, when are they going to say enough is enough? Like, I get that you're giving us these campaign contributions, and we'll certainly have you come in, and we want to hear your side of the story and listen to you. But when are they going to say, we have to make a decision in the best interest of our citizens? That's really where I'm at. And I
don't have any faith in that.
Right? Which gets back to, like, we can't count on government to fix this. So I think what I'm hearing you say is, you have now, and it didn't happen overnight. Like, I'm frankly kind of shocked that, how many employees does Imagine 360 have?
Right at 1,500.
1,500 employees. You're a good-sized organization yourself. And I would have thought the over-under on your largest client was more in the 50,000 range. And to hear that it's 11,000 and maybe you have one coming on that's 26,000, well, that's more than double. So you're definitely moving in the right direction.
And I am giving you statistics on covered employees.
Yeah.
Certain industries.
Right. Larger.
For every covered, there's two more who are not.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah.
But there are some companies out there, as you well know, that have hundreds of thousands and, of employees that should be on a model like yours. Because what we're talking about is, and I think what people are afraid of two things, basically, right? The leadership is afraid that it's too risky. It's uncharted territories. They don't like it. They want to hire IBM. And then HR leaders are afraid that it's going to be more work for them, disruption, and that they're not going to be able to handle the influx of inbound calls because people can't see their doctors and get the procedure that they want. Would you agree that those are kind of the two major sticking points?
If I were to combine them into one, and the not getting fired for hiring IBM, the brand loyalty to the 4 big insurance companies and the 3 PBMs is unlike brand loyalty in any other industry that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And so why that is, I don't know. I could opine forever, but it's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
I think a unique dynamic here is, Ray, the larger the company, the larger that second or third or fourth largest expense the health plan is, but the more distanced the C-suite is from it. Good point. It's wild,
right.
But it's true.
Right.
And so it very often does get left in the HR suite, and being careful how I phrase this, to some of the most brand loyal to those big 4 are in the HR suite.
Yeah.
And they are conservative by nature. So, owners, executives, C-suiters have to get involved in this.
Yeah.
What's going to be the tipping point? I don't know. To go back to your example of Chris Deacon, I can see readily how a large government, I mean, the momentum or the inertia in a government trying to turn that battleship on the ocean, I don't see it. I still think collectively businesses are sooner or later going to come to the conclusion that there's no more blood in this turnip. I can't, like, my broker can show up with a 21% increase. And if that's the best she can do, that's great, but I can't pay it.
Yeah.
There's no more I can pass along to my employees. There's no more I can raise the deductibles. Nothing more I can take out of their paycheck, and nothing more I can take out of my profit margin.
Right.
I have to do something different. And I think that which I just described is why we're seeing a lot more larger clients coming aboard this year than last year and the year before.
Yeah.
So hopefully this snowball just keeps growing.
Is there a client too small for your model?
You definitely have to be self-funded to be our client.
Okay.
And I find, Ray, that that's in the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah.
You know, in Indianapolis with very sophisticated brokers, it's nothing for an 80 life group to be self-funded, and therefore they could be our client.
Right.
In Southern California, at the other end of the spectrum, it's nothing for a 4,000 life group to scratch your head here, be fully insured. And so until you get off a fully insured chassis, you can't really be our client.
Right.
So.
But is there a minimum lower threshold?
We don't.
You don't mess with the small stuff.
We have a canned level funded product for smaller groups.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, there's nothing too small, but a very small group, Ray, is always a candidate, maybe even a probability to go back to fully insured. And so, we don't have a hard and fast rule, but.
Episode of Broken Healthcare Podcast is brought to you by Benefixa Healthcare Consultants. Visit benefixa.com to learn what's possible. Reduce the cost of healthcare for your organization, deliver better outcomes for your people, and yes, design health plans that give your people a path to $0 out-of-pocket costs for healthcare. Visit benefixa.com today. So in terms of the size, you do serve essentially any size, but with the kind of footnote that it's got to be appropriate for the appetite of the group. They need to understand, kind of
to know what they're buying.
To know what they're buying.
Right.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. Yeah, and that's part of I think the trouble as well. There's obviously far more small businesses than there are large businesses or mid-sized businesses. Right. In New York and California, you got to be 100 plus to even buy stop loss coverage. And I know that there are ways around that, but there's a lot of folks out there that are just kind of left swinging in the wind, if you will. There's no real insurance chassis for them to run on, and that we have some ideas and solutions for those groups, but it would be great if it was more uniform. Right? Why should someone who works for Amazon necessarily have better health care than someone who works for the dry cleaner down the block?
Right.
And I guess that's a question of insurance regulation and a conversation for a different day. But ultimately, you had this kind of progression from, and were you guys, were you headquartered in Pennsylvania then?
Philly, yeah, still are.
In Philly.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that was, when did you become ELAP?
When we wrote that first account, the Langdale Company, we needed to give the platform a name. We called it the ERISA Liability Assurance Program, ELAP. And I really don't remember the exact time frame, but in
ERISA Liability Assurance Program?
Assurance Program.
Okay.
Because technically it was not an insurance product. It was, we were becoming a co-fiduciary to your plan.
Yeah.
We were taking on certain roles and responsibilities to reprice the claim, to defend our work product, to work with the member. We couldn't use the word insurance. Anyway, ELAP's an acronym for that. And then that was, like I said, in the fall of 2007. In the next 18 months, we took on 6 or 8 more clients, and we needed a separate corporation. And so we came up with ELAP Incorporated. Wasn't very clever, really, but Steve and I were better sales guys than marketers. So that's where that came from.
Got it. And so I'm imagining that when you hung out your shingle as ELAP and you started this project, it was like, shooting fish in a barrel. They were coming from everywhere, and zero problems, right? No trouble whatsoever.
It's more like getting shot at in a barrel.
So describe a little bit of the early days, and this isn't, look, I think it's a fair question, and I always ask it, and I think it's important for even the most savvy HR person to ask about, I want to hear about something that went wrong, and what the result was, right? Like, because everybody could come in and say, here's our white paper, and look at this case study, and they're all going to give you the best of the best. But the real important question, it's almost like looking at an insurance contract. What's the most important thing in an insurance contract? What's not covered? Right? So give us a little snapshot into the early days and maybe some of the lessons that you learned.
Well, one thing we got right that we still get right to this day, Ray, is we knew we had to take care of the member.
Okay.
And so I'll go back and forth with this story here between then and now and then. We figured, as a result of applying our metrics to the claim, every now and then we were going to upset a hospital who thought we had underpaid them, or our client had underpaid them.
Sure.
And we were in the plan sponsor's plan document as a co-fiduciary. We owed them the obligation of protecting them. We figured that the member, being the David, not Goliath, the David,
right.
We knew we had to take care of the member.
Yep.
And we got that right. And so today.
Well, so let me stop you there for a second. So I just want to kind of unpack this for the audience. So what I hear you referring to is a potential balance bill situation, right? So someone goes to the hospital for X procedure. The hospital, charges $16,000 for the procedure, and you come along and say, no, based on our information going back to the early days and our cost plus model, we'll pay $8,000 for the procedure, not 16.
Right.
And if the hospital then turns around and says, no, you'll pay 16, then you have a Mexican standoff, right? And so the patient gets a bill for $16,000, and you're in the middle saying to your client, the employer, if something like this happens, we're going to step in and take care of it.
That's right.
Am I hearing you right?
You got it.
Okay,
and so
cool.
I'll pick up the ball there. So in the plan probably would be the first missive from the hospital who was upset at the payment. But remember, we'd put those definitions in the plan document, Medicare plus or cost plus, whichever's greater. We're your fiduciary. I mean, Ray, back to that fundamental duty to pay a reasonable cost for operating the plan. We realized, as did our new client down there in South Georgia, she couldn't control what a hospital was going to bill her.
Right.
But what she could control was how much of her plan assets she would commit to the payment. And the way she controlled it was to define it in the plan document. And she said, you may bill me way up here, but our plan covers X, and everything above X is excluded. So we didn't really have that many tussles with hospitals before we were able to prove, nope, it's in the plan document. That's what ERISA requires. ERISA also requires a reasonable commitment of plan assets. We were willing to defend that, and we successfully defend it. So the member does become kind of the attack point, if you will. And I hate to use that aggressive verbiage, but so we knew we had to protect the member, look out for the best interest of the member. My partner, Steve, said it so well. The phone's going to ring. The member's going to need help.
Right.
And in about 30 seconds, the member's going to think to herself, this whole system is rigged against me and my plan. My plan bought something different here, but they hired these people to work with me and protect me.
Right.
I'm okay. We're doing the right thing. Or after 30 seconds, the plan member is going to feel,
This sucks.
this sucks.
Where's my Blue Cross Blue Shield?
Exactly. This is, and so,
Yeah.
So we had to hire the type of people who could be empathetic, yet confidence instilling in that 30 seconds and the next 5, 7, 10 minutes, whatever was on the phone call. One thing we did right off the bat, if you were that Balance Build member, Ray, and you got me in member services for the first time, you got me forever. So you had my cell number. You didn't have to call back in on a 1-800 number and say, well, so-and-so told me X. Why won't you you got me every time.
Superb.
And so roll the clock forward to now. We got a lot of clientele in Texas, for example. If you speak Spanish, you get a Spanish-speaking version of me.
Right.
You get, like I said, you get my cell number. If later, a year and a half later, your daughter gets a Balance Bill, your daughter gets me.
Mm-hmm.
It's,
Continuity.
Yeah.
That's huge.
And with larger clients, we assign them a pod full of member personnel where that group may get one of only 8 people. So they really understand that business. But back to that,
And that's just good business, right?
Exactly.
That's good business fundamentals.
We knew we were going to sink or swim
Yeah.
with the happiness of the members.
Yeah.
And so the way this evolved, we had 2 or 3 people who were experienced claims adjudicators. We kind of picked the most empathetic ones. But today, the member services department is the largest department, and we hire predominantly from 3 sources. We feel like we can teach you the benefits industry, but we can't teach you empathy. We can't teach you to give a damn.
Yeah.
So we definitely invoke personality profiles, and we hire former school teachers. We hire former social service workers, and we hire military spouses. We were talking upstairs before we went live about their good and bad unintended consequences of COVID. For us, the military spousal program has been unbelievably bountiful, meaning if you're a military spouse, you're literally going to move every 2 years.
Yeah.
That means picking up. I may have found a job in Virginia Beach because my husband was in the Navy and I was stationed there. 2 years in, I may be loving it, but now I've got to move to Jacksonville, Florida with the Navy. Well, now they can move and move and move, and they love the job. That they're very empathetic people by nature.
Right.
Understanding.
Yeah.
They identify well with blue collar. It's been a great success.
And you have to have that. I'll share a story with you. So something went down with one of my clients where they were balance billed, and the patient had done everything right, and she documented everything. She was meticulous about everything, and she had phenomenal records. And at the end of the day, this is 2 years after the claim, and she's getting a balance bill from the major diagnostic company, and it's for $655. And so the TPA is saying the claim was never received and filed with us. And the major diagnostic company also had meticulous record keeping, and they proved that the claim was filed with Cigna, but apparently it should have been filed with Cigna Med Solutions. And so, the communication went like this. But the patient, the member, did everything right. And the TPA was going back and forth arguing that they didn't receive the claim in a timely manner, and therefore she would have to take it up directly with the major
so
diagnostic
their reason
company.
for denial was failure to timely file.
Correct.
Okay.
And so that really didn't hold water. And this is a TPA that hadn't placed any business with them, but the guy who is the intermediary, the MGU, I have a good relationship with. I trust him. He places a lot of business with this TPA. And apparently they had a huge technology snafu that really sent their business on a spiral. They didn't know, what M was up. But the member is not responsible for any of that, right? So we have to take care of the member, getting back to your point. So I intervened, and ultimately I ended up contacting the major diagnostic company, telling them what the story was, and asking for a reduced fee, because it's certainly not her issue. Long story short, we were able to reduce the fee from $655 to $311. To the patient's credit, she wouldn't let it go because right was on her side, and so good for her. And we had a little more communication all the way up to the CEO of the TPA, and ultimately they did the right thing and they stepped in and they paid the balance bill. But I'm telling this
And
story.
all of this was over 300 and something dollars.
$311.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But it's a great give a damn factor by you.
Oh, I appreciate
And
that.
that's what, I can boil it down to one thing, that's what moved the needle.
Yeah. No, the client was very appreciative. The patient was very appreciative. It happened to be the wife of the COO, who was a gem of a guy. He just wanted to pay it and get it. He's like, just pay it.
Yeah.
And the trouble, Woody, is what people don't realize is that these are minutes and hours of our lives that we're never going to get back.
Right.
Right? It's maddening. And I'm sure you were on many a claim call.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, my God. And a lot of it is just, it could be solved with just a little common sense and efficiency and understanding. So ultimately, after all the smoke cleared, we got the right result. But it never would have happened if the patient first and foremost didn't give a damn. I didn't give a damn. Nobody gave a damn.
Right.
And ultimately, the TPA did do the right thing.
Yeah.
It just should have happened a lot quicker.
Yeah. And so back to the personality profile thing in our member services department, I'm sure there's a different phrase, but we need for your personality profile to read out that you have a high give a damn factor.
Yes.
Love it. Yeah. So back to that, I talked about when we went to see Langdale, and she had that hot off the presses claim. What had happened, Ray, is this young fellow had a car wreck in the middle of the night. He was airlifted from, God knows where in South Georgia to the University of Florida Health System, and he was in ICU there, and he ran up quite a tab. And shortly thereafter is when Steve and I were in front of this lady, and she had the claim. We applied our math. We obviously at this point we couldn't backdate any plan language, but she contractually committed to us, to use our methodology, and in exchange for that and a fee, we agreed to reprice the claim and defend our work product. So roll the clock forward, and some number of weeks or months go by, and this kid was young. He was old enough to be an adult, young enough to be living at home.
So he was 41.
Modern day, yeah. He was 19 or 20. Anyway, I took the first bounce bill call.
Yeah.
We only had 3 employees, my partner and I and one other, so it was going to be one out of the 3 of us. This woman calls, and I'm not making this up. She's a guidance counselor at an elementary school in Willacoochee, Georgia. And she has an accent that makes mine sound like yours. So I, followed the recipe that Steve and I had concocted. I said, ma'am, we're going to take care of your son. You will not have to deal with this person, but we're going to hire an attorney to deal with Shan's. That attorney is going to set forth that your son's plan, the Langdale, is paid Shan's fairly and reasonably, and they've paid according to their SOPs. You won't have to be a part of that. That's our dispute to hedge. But we're going to assign you a member concierge and your son, and anytime you have a question, you call this person. And it was a longer conversation than that.
Sure.
But when it was over, she said, let me get this straight. I don't have to deal with the hospital. You're going to have an attorney do that. And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, anything I don't understand, any question I have, you're going to assign me somebody, this person whose number you've given me. I call that person. I can talk to him for 2 minutes or 10 or 30. Do I understand that correctly? And I said, yes, ma'am. She said, that's fair.
Right.
And that's the logic we have tried to apply all the way the next 18, 19 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Reminds me of Pulp Fiction. You're going to send the wolf?
That's right.
Motherfucker, that's all you had to say.
That's right.
I'm quoting Pulp Fiction, folks. So yeah, but at the end of the day, that's all people really want. They just want to know that someone cares.
Yeah.
And they want their problem solved.
Ray, we obviously catalog and sometimes publish inside our organization kudos from members. And I don't read all of them, but I read the ones that get published in our employee newsletter or weekly heads ups or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There are more that just have to do with two things. Thanks for helping and caring, or thanks for helping me understand what's going on here. Never mind the technicalities of a bounce bill or getting me in to see a specialist when it was going to take 8 weeks to get an appointment and you got me one in 4 days. Technicalities like that, but just having access to somebody who cares and can make the complex simple. That's what these people need.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
all right, that's a wrap. Hit like, follow, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.